This podcast has been made possible by Workday.
Hi, this is Akash Palkiwala. I'm CFO of Qualcomm, and you're listening to CFO Thought Leader Podcast.
This is episode 856.
One of the things that I think is incredibly important for a finance organization is to connect business metrics with financial outcomes, because that's how you really can then talk to the organization and get the organization in motion. An operations organization understands their operational metrics. A commercial organization understands their commercial metrics. How do you take these sets of metrics, directly connect them to financial metrics, and help people understand, why are you giving a certain amount of budget? Why are you driving in a certain direction? Why is the pricing why is your pricing structures influencing how you're driving the commercial org?
Hi, it's Jack. On today's show, we speak with Céline Dufétel, CFO of Checkoutcom. Within the last 10 years, Céline Dufétel served as head of McKinsey & Company's North American asset management practice. She spent nearly 4 years as CFO of T. Rowe Price and another 3 as global head of marketing for Neuberger Berman. And along the way, she became a mother of 3. And of course, CFO of Checkout.com. CFO Céline Dufétel looks back and forward for us along a time-bending finance career journey after this. In a world that's always changing, one thing never does: your need to adapt, your need to evolve, your need to grow. That's why we built Workday, a single finance, HR, and planning system that can change as your needs change and evolve as the world evolves. To learn how Workday is helping mid-size organizations embrace the future with confidence, visit us at workday.com. Hello, we're speaking with Céline Dufétel, COO and CFO of Checkout.com, one of the larger fintechs in Europe, and it's now growing its presence here in the States. Céline, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Céline, permit me just to highlight a few of items from your resume. It is a bit of a standout resume. You are a former McKinsey partner. You were at McKinsey more than 10 years, from 2004 to 2014, where you were the leader of its North American asset management practice. And then you leave McKinsey, something you don't see every day, to join Neuberger Berman, to be global head of marketing and client service there, where you were managing director. You then were appointed CFO for T.O. Price, where you also took on the COO role there as well. You were there nearly 4 years before you opened your next chapter at Checkout.com, where you are today, as mentioned, as CFO as well as the COO. How'd I do? Am I close?
That's exactly right.
Okay, excellent. A really interesting background. Again, we don't see these types of roles every day, but also would love to have you go back in time for us and understand better how you decided to become a CFO and what were the experiences that kind of pointed you that direction? What would those be?
Sure. So, as you mentioned, I spent the first 10 years of my career at McKinsey, and where I was a strategy consultant. So, I thought that was actually, when I look back now, being a CFO, I think that brought a lot of very formative experiences for me. And at the heart of that is connecting strategy and finance, and how you can use those two tools to really drive the growth, drive the trajectory of an organization. What was also unique at being at McKinsey and being a consultant was you had to not just come up with a good strategy answer, you really had to influence and convince your clients that you had come up with the right answer for them. And when I think about the skills that you need as a CFO, I think those influencing skills are also hugely important because you're there navigating, whatever trends are in your industry, setting direction for the organization, and it's incredibly important that your peers, the CEO, and the broader organization at large believe in the direction and follow and be willing to kind of follow the direction that you're trying to set for the organization. So I think that was just a really, really critical learnings and step in my career. Moving to Tiro was a huge opportunity, was a great experience. Becoming the CFO, I think there as well, at a big part of that was also say that again. A big part of that was also being exposed and working with some of the greatest investors in the world, where I also learned a lot about investor relations and how to think about working with investors, communicating with investors, and communicating the strategy of the organization with them as well. And then also, leaving McKinsey to be at Neuberger Berman, to be in a much more operational role in many ways was also very formative, because I think as CFO, yes, you're driving strategy, you're trying to pilot the organization, but it's really important that you be really in tune with what it takes to execute well. And there are some very operational parts of a CFO responsibility as well. So those different experiences brought different things to me, and are all very, very helpful in my role as a CFO, whether it was at Tiro or today at Checkout.
Like many people, I suppose, I'm always intrigued when I see McKinsey on a resume. How long were you there before made partner?
So I was at McKinsey for 10 years. So I spent 6 years there before becoming a partner, and then 4 years as a partner.
Wow. And just the listening audience, I think, will understand there are quite a few more CFOs out there than there are McKinsey partners. And meanwhile, I would imagine their tenure is a lot longer as well than versus a CFO's tenure. But even as you stepped into this sort of exclusive realm of partnership at McKinsey, did you all along look past it and think maybe someday I'd like to jump over to the operations side and become a CFO?
Yeah, I really wanted a chance to be an operator and, have a chance to not just consult and advise, but get a chance to do and to have impact in an organization. It's one thing to think you have a good idea and to advise your clients around that idea. It's another one to take that idea and actually make it happen. And I really wanted to be able to see the impact of my decisions and be able to drive an organization. And so it was hard to leave McKinsey. I absolutely loved the organization, but it was the right time.
I'll ask you something about diversity and women partners. Were there quite a few women partners at McKinsey?
There were fewer women partners than men partners, for sure. Like many organizations, a lot of women entered at the analyst or associate level, but their representation at a partner level was much more modest. It's of course something that McKinsey, like many organizations, has certainly been focused on, and increasingly so, right, over the last 10 years. But especially in the financial services practice, it was not a heavily women-dominated or part of the organization.
First, you go to, is it Neuberger Berman, and you're global head of marketing and client service, not specifically a finance role. Am I right about that?
That's right.
At that time, what was the attraction? Was it more interesting to you rather than finance, or
when I
something more to learn there?
Yeah, when I left McKinsey, a lot of my colleagues were leaving for strategy roles, which was sort of a natural continuation of their career at McKinsey. What I really wanted to do was anything but strategy. I really wanted to learn and prove to myself and to others that I could take on something very operational and drive those operational outcomes. And it was really in the mindset of completing my skill set. I already had the strategy check mark, and I wanted to be able to develop other skills and prove myself in other ways. I really enjoyed that experience as well, and especially as it allowed me to become a CFO, which is a role that I think is a role I really enjoy, and I think ultimately found a great fit.
When you look back now, before we ask you about checkout.com, when you look back now, is there some part of this journey where you experienced accelerated learning? Maybe it was a merger and acquisition that you were involved with. Maybe there was a mentor that you realize now how valuable that was at that place and time. I don't know. But is there any part of the journey where you accelerated your learning for one reason or another that you could share with us?
To me, the acceleration of learning is about putting yourselves in different situations where you need to develop new skills, right? So when I say that I left McKinsey not to go to strategy, but to have a very operational role, was to accelerate that learning curve and to work with a very different type of people on very different problems. It was very operational. It was for clients. There was a lot of situations to resolve that were, just about the nuts and bolts of how we were working with clients. And so taking on the role of Tiro, taking on the role of Checkout have all been part of that. They've been part about accelerating my learning journey by throwing myself into new experiences. Checkout is in payments. I was in asset management, a different part of financial services. We're a fast growth pre-IPO company. Different than a more mature organization, different kinds of problems. There are a lot of similarities between driving transformation and change in a more mature organization and driving scale and growth in a fast growth organization, but there are differences as well. And so for me, it's always been about knowing what were the new level of skills or the new types of skills that I wanted to develop and finding ways and opportunities to expose myself to those problems to develop those skills.
We're going to jump to our business segment where I'll just begin by asking you about checkout.com. I mentioned it's one of FinTech's larger European players, but what would you tell us? Tell us about this company. What does it do? What are its offerings?
Yeah, sure. So we're a global FinTech. We're focused on digital payments. Our mission is to enable businesses and their communities to thrive in the digital economy. So how do we do that? We provide access to global payments to a variety of different segments. We work with fintechs, we work with e-commerce, we work in services as well, and we primarily focus on enterprise clients for whom we abstract the complexity of payments. So it's the simplicity of integrating with us, accessing many geographies, and then of course the performance of our solutions. So in payments, it's about giving great acceptance rates for those payments to our clients. And we also are very focused on providing best-in-class service and having true partnership with our clients. We work with very sophisticated organizations, large enterprise organizations, and we're there to solve their problems. So we compete with some incumbent organizations such as Workday or banks, as well as the new generation of players such as Adyen or Stripe. And ultimately, as a CFO myself, I like to help CFOs and their payments organization drive bottom line impact, drive growth in their organization by giving them opportunities to expand to new geographies, accept new payment methods, have great performance of their payments, which ultimately impacts their bottom line. And then, of course, we try to also give them great access to data for their own processes.
Maybe give us an abbreviated history of the company's capital structure.
So we're a privately owned organization. Our founder and CEO, Guillaume Pouzat, founded the organization. And our latest round of funding was in January of this year, where we raised our Series D.
And tell us something about your arrival there. Did you make a key hire since you've been there or reorganized in some way?
Yes, I've brought in almost quite a few leaders into the organization. So, in joining Guillaume on this adventure, my role in many ways is helping the organization mature and be ready to take on the kind of scale and complexity that we're taking on. The organization has grown incredibly fast, and as a fintech, I like to remind all my colleagues that think of us as a tech organization is that we're also in financial services. And so there's a lot of regulation, there's a lot of complexity. There are things like FX risk. Essentially, as a finance organization, we're very much part of the product because we move money around the world in many currencies and millions of transactions. And so My role is to help create the right set of controls, processes, structure that help us scale those products for our clients. And so for that, I have brought in additional talent and people into the organization to help me achieve that.
Can you tell us a little bit about your top of mind numbers or metrics? And I usually ask this question, what are the numbers you look at when you come in each morning before your first cup of coffee? What is it that you're paying close attention to daily?
Yeah, so at a daily level, of course, we look at our transactions and our volumes, across the world, across our products. But there are many other metrics that I look at, and for me, what's important is not just the immediate results that I'm looking at that day, but what are the leading indicators of what's happening with the business. As a growth organization, a lot of the metrics we're focused on are growth related, so commercial related, whether it's our pipeline, it's our productivity, it's how we're doing across various regions, it's our win rates in our, competitively. And then I also look closely at our share of wallet. So the growth within our existing client base, in addition to bringing in new clients, is incredibly important for us.
Share of wallet, for instance, is that something you have sought to better expose to the organization or to part of the organization? We're always looking for a metric or number that you as a finance leader have sought to better educate the organization about, or in some way raise its profile.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a metric that we spend a lot of time talking about, and that with our commercial organization, we've worked to refine and get smarter about, because being able to drive growth with our existing cohorts of merchants is very important, in addition to obviously what we do with bringing in additional relationships, which is maybe something that a commercial organization is more used to, the next deal, the next, part of business development. But both are really important for me as a CFO.
We've been asking finance leaders about their mindset when it comes to talent, and whether that's evolved over time, particularly with the pandemic, which made talent, of course, and the safety of the workforce top of mind. But curious to hear about your talent mindset, and as a finance leader, how you influence some of the decision making around talent today.
Yeah, sure. So, having grown up at McKinsey, where people were the product, right? People were the service that we were bringing to our clients. I've always grown up thinking that who we hire, who we develop, how we coach, how we develop talent is the most important thing that we do as leaders. And so I devote a lot of my time to that. That includes spending a lot of time hiring and bringing in the right talent, spending a lot of time coaching and developing the talent. And my philosophy has always been to surround myself with people who complement my skills. Ultimately, we're a team, we win as a team, and that requires complementary skill sets. So it's knowing what you're strong at, knowing what you're less strong at, and building the best team. I also, I ask of my leaders to maintain a very high bar in terms of the talent that they bring into the organization, because ultimately I think that will have an outsized impact on the results that we can drive as an organization and the growth of the organization.
Did Checkout.com adopt a virtual office, I guess, during the pandemic? And is there a lasting part of the model now, virtual, or what was the influence of that?
Yeah, I mean, like all organization, we went virtual. We recruited a lot of talent over the course of the pandemic. It was a period of hyper growth for Checkout. Today we have a hybrid model, so we're back in the office 2 days a week. We strongly believe in collaboration as part of innovation and the work and the quality of things and products and services that we deliver to our merchants. And so that's kind of the model that we've adopted.
With your background, again, strategy and finance, is there some way you've organized I don't know if it's your FP&A team, or, you want to marry finance and strategy more closely? I don't know how you might achieve that. Is there something you did to encourage that?
Yeah, so I've adopted a model first at Tiro and now at Checkout where I have a single leader in charge of FP&A strategy and pricing, as well as investor relations. And I think those things go very well together in terms of how do you set the direction for the organization through strategy? How do you translate that into numbers, resources, an FP&A plan that that aligns to that? How do you communicate that story externally? And then how do you actually measure it and measure that it's having the impact that you really want it to have? And one of the things that I think is incredibly important for a finance organization is to connect business metrics with financial outcomes, because that's how you really can then talk to the organization and get the organization in motion. You know, an operations organization understands their operational metrics. A commercial organization understands their commercial metrics. How do you take these sets of metrics, directly connect them to financial metrics, and help people understand why are you giving a certain amount of budget? Why are you driving in a certain direction? Why is the pricing why is your pricing structures influencing how you're driving the commercial org? And so for me, that's been really successful to have those teams collaborate closely together, and bring the accounting talent closer to the strategy talent and kind of, and vice versa, and cross-pollinate each other in terms of what they're teaching each other.
Right. Is there a way the visibility into data those different groups have, do they share a common, whether it's a dashboard or it's just some access that they have to certain numbers or metrics? Is that pre-existing before you arrived, or is there something you've done to enhance how they're, accessing and sharing information?
Yeah, so one of the things I really like to do is make sure that everybody is using the exact same definitions. You know, sometimes you'll walk into an organization, they'll say, well, that's finance definition of a client going live, or that's operations definition, or, there really shouldn't be that, right? The whole organization needs to talk about data, talk about metrics in the same way, and use the same definitions, and then ultimately the same numbers. Because if we don't talk the same language, I don't know how we can all drive towards the same outcome that we're trying to drive to. So one of the things that I've worked on here, but I've worked on in my other roles as well, is making sure that we're all aligned and we're all looking at the same data. Whatever is the sales pipeline is also the pipeline that finance uses. Whatever is our view of our win rates, whatever is our view of our profitability per client, whatever is our view of share of wallet, whatever is our view of any kind of critical commercial metric, the time it takes for a client to go live, it's the same that we look across so that we can align on what are the right OKRs, what are the right goals for the organization, and then we can measure those outcomes, right? Because if you're not measuring, you're much less likely to be making progress, obviously.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for that. We're going to jump to our finance strategic moment question, where we ask finance leaders to look back for us and just share one story or moment of insight that they had during the course of their career. It might have been at checkout.com, but it might have been at McKinsey, where you had a moment of strategic insight that led you to respond, whether it was a risk that you avoided or an opportunity that you pursued or a reorganization of some kind. I don't know, but anything come to mind when we ask for a finance strategic moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been many, but if I had to sort of abstract it as a theme, I would say in my time at Tiro, I think the strategic moment was showing the organization the power of a strong FP&A capability, and moving from a finance organization that was very strong on accounting to an organization that could do that, but also give great business insight through FP&A. There really wasn't much of an FP&A team before. And many decisions came from that around parts of our operations we needed to outsource because of, the metrics that we looked around that business, or the strategic need to do M&A because of other metrics that we were looking at, or how we were directing resources and budgets across the organization as a result of the outcomes that were being driven off of those investments. So being able to mature those capabilities and get the organization to think differently about what finance could bring to the organization.
Hi, it's Jack. I hope you're enjoying our talk with CFO Céline Dufétel of Checkout.com. A couple of footnotes for you regarding Céline. Like me, perhaps, you may have heard an American accent. I assume she grew up in the United States. Céline is actually French. She spent a number of years here during her childhood, I guess, when her father was on assignment and acquired an American accent. She returned to France and actually she served in the French Navy. Certainly worthy of note. We now enter the mentoring round with Céline. Mentoring round now where we're going to ask you to look back again, and we're wondering about your first 90 days at T. Rowe Price, I suppose, the first time you stepped into a CFO role. If I have that wrong, correct me. But your first 90 days there, as all the responsibilities fell on you and you realized, oh, so this belongs to me. Didn't know that. Whatever it might have been. If you could go back in time and just give yourself a piece of advice, how to do that role, how to do it better, maybe, don't know, but anything come to mind, what would be that piece of advice you'd give yourself if you go back to that first 60, 90 days you were in that job?
So I was actually thinking about, some advice I've received in my career at McKinsey that's actually very applicable to the CFO role. It became even more important in the CFO role, which is when I first stepped into a team management or a leadership role at McKinsey, I was getting very flustered when things were very ambiguous, things were changing constantly, or there was, potentially an unhappy client. And one of my mentors said to me, when you waver a little bit or when you show a bit of stress, the impact on your team is like 10 or 100x, right? The person gave me a visual of saying, if you're moving just a little bit right to left, your team's moving, hugely right to left. And I would say that to anybody coming into the CFO role, which is there's going to be good times for an organization. There's going to be tough times for an organization, and everybody will be looking to you in terms of should they stay calm, should they not stay calm, and that ability to kind of get everybody to not get distracted potentially with what's going around in the environment, stay focused on execution of the organization is hugely important. And so that's probably what I would kind of tell myself again going into this role, and advice that I found very valuable.
Céline, would you mind if I ask you just to reflect a little bit on this uncertain economy with so many unknowns attached to it?
Well, I definitely think 2023 is going to be a difficult year. I think just continuing to see inflation play through, what that'll do to consumer. I think we're obviously, seeing some changes in the job market as well, so that'll impact the consumer. We're a very global organization, so I also think that may play out differently in the US than it will in Europe. We have a big business in Europe, so that's important to us as well. And those economies are also going through challenging times. So I'm not too optimistic about 2023, which is why I think it's also important to keep a long-term view as we're running the business in terms of, go through next year, but invest for those 2024, 2025 as well.
We always like to ask our guests to reflect a little bit on the personal side. And we're wondering if you have a habit that you're known for or part of a daily routine, something that sets you apart. People would say, that's just how she does it. Céline is known for that. It might be something a family member would even mention to us, not necessarily a work colleague. Is there something you're known for, some routine or quirk or habit?
So I'm a mother of three. So I've got a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 5-month-old. And I think my routine in many ways is them in that it keeps me grounded. When I walk in the door at home, I take on my second job, completely different job, and one where my mind goes in a completely different place. And in many ways is tiring, but recharging also, at the same time.
Céline, in the bio we were supplied, were you a Fortune 40 under 40 honoree recently, or is that in your? How did you achieve all this?
Yeah, that was during my tenure at T. Rowe Price. So
Okay.
that was 2 years ago, I believe now.
Well, I guess 2 years matters, but wow. Okay. I just need to reveal that to the audience. Finally, we also like to ask if you have a book recommendation for us.
Well, I mostly read children's book these days, so I'm not sure the audience needs toddler book
Yeah.
recommendations.
Maybe they would.
Well, for the mothers of toddlers out there, or parents of toddlers out there, sorry, I recommend the Grumpy Monkey series.
Perfect. Wait. I'm looking it up. Grumpy. Okay, it's written by Suzanne Lang and illustrated by Max Lang. Perhaps a family production. Very nice. Thank you for that. And we are up to our final question, I'm afraid, where I ask you to look forward finally. And we're interested about the next 12 months. What would be your priorities as CFO?
Well, we're obviously going through a period of huge, like, macro uncertainty and geopolitical uncertainty. I think as CFOs right now, the perhaps the most important thing is to really be focused on what you can control, not what you can't control, in the sense of course, there's scenario planning around what may happen around you, but I think it's really important to get the organization focused on execution. And especially for us as still a young organization, a very fast growth organization, I don't want us to lose sight of what we need to do to achieve various horizons of growth, right? I always think about, what do I need to do, or what does the organization need to do to achieve our numbers next year? What does it need to do to achieve the numbers that are 2 or 3 years out, or even 5 years out? Because with a long product development cycle, you want to make sure that you don't get distracted by the current environment. You're continuing to invest in your capabilities so that you're not just hitting your numbers next year, but you're hitting your numbers 3 years from now or 5 years from now. And that means investing in certain product and capabilities that will be ready then. So my focus right now is really on that. It's on making sure that we're focused on execution with different horizons of growth, and thinking about the right trajectory for the business, and also maturing all of our kind of backbone and infrastructure capability as we scale from being, a fast growth startup to being a more mature organization.
Céline Dufétel, thank you for joining us on CFO Thought Leader.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Hello, listeners. Do us a favor. Be certain to subscribe to CFO Thought Leader on Apple Podcasts, or if you're an Android user, check us out on Spotify or Google Play. If you like the show, please recommend it to a friend.